The autumn evening wrapped around the Metropolitan Grand Hotel like silk. And inside the Crystal Ballroom, the annual philanthropy summit brought together the wealthiest people in the city. Grace Mitchell moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Her clipboard held close to her chest as she coordinated the evening's events. She had planned dozens of charity galas, but tonight held special significance. The proceeds would fund art programs for underprivileged children. A cause close to her heart, her simple navy dress and pearl earrings seemed modest compared to the designer gowns surrounding her. But Grace had learned long ago that elegance came from within, not from a price tag. She checked her watch and signaled to the catering staff. The main course would be served in 10 minutes, and everything needed to be perfect. Across the room, Harrison Sterling stood at the center of a circle of admirers. At 36, he had built sterling innovations from nothing into a technology empire worth billions. His tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly, and his dark hair was styled with casual precision. He spoke with confidence that bordered on arrogance, discussing his latest acquisition with a group of investors who hung on his every word. Harrison had donated a substantial amount to tonight's charity, though he viewed it more as a networking opportunity than genuine philanthropy. His assistant, Daniel Park, stood nearby, ready to handle any request. Daniel had known Harrison since they were children, and he alone understood the loneliness that lived behind his friend's success. Grace wove between tables, ensuring each detail met her exacting standards. She had spent weeks organizing this event, coordinating with vendors, managing volunteers, handling last-minute changes. Her father's medical bills had been mounting since his diagnosis, but she refused to compromise on quality. These children deserved the best possible programs. She would make sure they received them. As she turned to check on the silent auction tables, Grace collided with someone. The impact sent her clipboard flying and papers scattered across the marble floor. She stumbled backward, catching herself against a nearby column. Harrison felt the collision more than saw it. He turned, irritated at the interruption, and found a woman kneeling on the floor, gathering scattered papers. Several guests had stopped to watch. Creating an unwanted spectacle, Grace quickly collected the papers, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She had been so focused on her checklist that she had not seen him standing there. As she reached for the last sheet, a polished dress shoe stepped on it. She looked up to find Harrison Sterling glaring down at her. His gray eyes were cold, his expression one of barely contained annoyance. The conversations around them had quieted, and Grace felt dozens of eyes watching the scene unfold. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Harrison's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "I just donated $500,000 to this event, and I expect better than being knocked over by careless staff." Grace stood slowly, the papers clutched in her hands. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling. I should have been watching where I was going." Harrison brushed at his sleeve as though her touch had somehow contaminated him. "People like you need to understand your place. This event exists because people like me write checks. The least you can do is stay out of the way." Something in his tone, the casual cruelty of his words, sparked anger in Grace's chest. She had dealt with difficult clients before, had smiled through countless insults and demands. But tonight, thinking of the children who would benefit from this event, thinking of her father fighting for his life in a hospital bed, something inside her shifted. She met Harrison's gaze directly, her brown eyes steady and clear. "You are right, Mr. Sterling. You did donate money tonight. But writing a check does not give you permission to treat people as though they are invisible." The room went completely silent. Harrison's eyes widened slightly, unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he considered beneath his notice. Grace continued, her voice quiet but firm. "I have spent 3 months organizing this event. Every detail, every moment designed to help children who desperately need art programs in their lives. Your donation is appreciated, truly. But kindness costs nothing, and it seems to be the one thing your money cannot buy." She placed her clipboard on a nearby table and removed the event coordinator badge from around her neck. "I apologize for the collision. It was an accident, but I will not apologize for reminding you that every person in this room, regardless of their bank account, deserves basic human respect." Grace turned and walked toward the exit, her head held high despite the trembling in her hands. Behind her, whispers erupted like wildfire. Harrison stood frozen, the eyes of everyone he knew suddenly focused on him. His mother, Victoria Sterling, approached from across the room, her face tight with barely concealed fury. Daniel touched Harrison's arm gently. Maybe you should go after her and apologize, but Harrison's pride would not allow it. He straightened his jacket and forced a dismissive laugh. She's being dramatic. Let her go. Yet as the evening continued, Harrison found himself distracted. He could not shake the memory of Grace's eyes, the quiet strength in her voice. No one had ever walked away from him before. No one had ever suggested that his money mattered less than his character. Later that night, unable to sleep, Harrison sat in his penthouse overlooking the city. The lights below sparkled like fallen stars, and somewhere out there, Grace Mitchell was probably sleeping peacefully, unbothered by their encounter. The thought irritated him more than it should have. He picked up his phone and messaged Daniel. Find out everything about the woman from tonight. Grace Mitchell. Daniel's response came quickly. Are you sure that is wise? Harrison stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Just do it. As dawn broke over the skyline, Harrison realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, someone had made him feel small. And that person had not been a business rival or a powerful competitor. She had been a woman in a simple navy dress who refused to accept his cruelty. The question that kept him awake was simple, yet terrifying. What if she was right? What if all his success, all his wealth, meant nothing if he had lost the ability to see other people as human beings? Harrison looked at his reflection in the darkened window. He barely recognized the man staring back. Harrison Sterling prided himself on solving problems quickly and efficiently. Within 48 hours of the gala incident, Daniel had compiled a complete report on Grace Mitchell. Harrison read it in his office. It's a city stretching out below him through floor-to-ceiling windows. Grace Mitchell, 29 years old. Event coordinator by day, art teacher 3 evenings a week at the Riverside Community Center. She lived in a modest apartment in the older part of town. Her mother had passed away when Grace was 16, leaving her to help raise her younger brother while finishing high school. She had put herself through college while working 2 jobs. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, had recently been diagnosed with a serious heart condition and was undergoing treatment at Mercy General Hospital. The report included photographs. Grace teaching children to paint, her face bright with genuine joy. Grace visiting her father in the hospital, holding his weathered hand. Grace organizing a food drive, carrying boxes despite the rain. In every image, she looked nothing like the polished socialites Harrison usually encountered. She looked real. Harrison closed the folder and stared out at the city. He had expected to find something that would justify his behavior, some flaw that would prove she had been out of line. Instead, he found a woman who gave more than she had, who worked tirelessly for others, who embodied everything his mother had taught him to view as weakness. 3 days after the gala, Harrison found himself driving to the Riverside Community Center. He told himself he was simply curious, that he wanted to understand why someone would choose such a limited life. The building was old, its brick facade weathered by decades of winters. Children's artwork decorated the windows. Bright splashes of color against the gray afternoon. Inside, the center hummed with activity. Elderly people played cards in one corner. Teenagers practiced in a music room. The smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee and something baking in a kitchen somewhere. Harrison felt completely out of place in his expensive suit. He found Grace in a large room at the back of the building. She stood before an easel, teaching a group of children ranging from about 6 to 12 years old. Paint splattered her jeans and old sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was laughing at something a small girl had said. Art is not about making everything perfect, Grace explained, demonstrating a brush technique. It is about expressing what is inside you, about showing the world how you see things. Every painting tells a story, and your stories matter. Harrison watched from the doorway as she moved between students, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. She knew each child by name, remembered details about their lives, celebrated their small victories. With them, she was patient and warm. With him, She had been rightfully angry. A young boy noticed Harrison and tugged on Grace's sleeve, pointing. She turned, and her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. She said something to the children, then walked toward him, wiping paint from her hands with a rag. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, stopping a few feet away, "I did not expect to see you here." Harrison felt uncharacteristically nervous. "I wanted to apologize properly. What I said at the gala was unacceptable." Grace studied him with those clear brown eyes. And Harrison had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through his expensive clothes to the insecurity beneath. "Is that what your public relations team suggested?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "This has nothing to do with my company or my image. I came because you were right. I treated you terribly, and I want to make it right." A timer went off in the art room behind Grace. She glanced back at the children, then returned her attention to Harrison. "I appreciate the apology, Mr. Sterling. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a class to teach." She started to turn away, but Harrison spoke quickly. "I want to volunteer here." Grace stopped and turned back slowly, her expression skeptical. "Volunteer?" "Yes. You said kindness costs nothing. Maybe you could teach me what that actually means." Grace crossed her arms, the paint-stained rag still in her hand. "Mr. Sterling, this is not a game or a photo opportunity. These children need consistency and genuine care. Not someone looking to ease their guilty conscience for a few weeks before moving on. I understand that." Harrison met her gaze steadily. "I am not asking you to trust me immediately. I am asking for a chance to prove that people can change." For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Harrison could hear the children chattering behind her, their voices filled with the uncomplicated joy he had forgotten existed. Finally, Grace sighed. "We need someone to help set up equipment before classes and clean up afterward. The work is not glamorous. It involves hauling supplies, washing brushes, mopping floors. Are you willing to do that?" "Yes." Grace looked at him skeptically. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 5 to 8. Do not be late, do not make promises you cannot keep, and absolutely do not tell these children who you are. They do not need to know about your money or your company. They need someone reliable who actually cares. Can you do that?" Harrison nodded. "I can do that. Then be here Tuesday at 5. Wear clothes you do not mind ruining." She turned and walked back to her students, leaving Harrison standing in the doorway. As he drove home, he realized his hands were shaking slightly. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But the thought of disappointing Grace Mitchell terrified him. Tuesday evening arrived cold and rainy. Harrison showed up at the community center at 4:45. Wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt he had found buried in his closet, Grace looked surprised to see him, then nodded toward a storage room. "Easels and paint supplies need to be set up for 15 students. Paint water needs to be fresh, brushes sorted by size, drop cloths laid out to protect the floor. Think you can handle that?" Harrison rolled up his sleeves. "Tell me what to do." Over the following weeks, Harrison learned what real work felt like. He carried heavy boxes, scrubbed paint from floors, organized supply closets. His back ached in ways he had forgotten were possible. His hands developed calluses. But something strange happened. As he worked alongside Grace, helping her create a space where children could express themselves freely, he felt more satisfaction than any business deal had ever brought him. The children accepted him without question. They called him Harry, taught him painting techniques, shared their dreams and fears with innocent trust. He learned that Miguel wanted to be an architect, that Sophie worried about her grandmother's health, that David used art to process his parents' divorce. These children had so little, yet they gave so freely. Grace watched Harrison carefully during those first weeks, waiting for him to quit or reveal his true motives. But he kept showing up, working hard, listening more than he spoke. She noticed how gently he corrected mistakes, how he remembered each child's preferences, how he stayed late to ensure everything was perfect for the next class. One evening, after the children had left, Grace found Harrison sitting alone in the art room, staring at a painting a young girl had made of her family. The figures were simple, stick-like, but radiating love. When was the last time you made something with your own hands? Grace asked quietly, startling him. Harrison thought about it. I honestly cannot remember. Everything I have built has been through other people's labor, other people's creativity. I just provide the funding and direction. Grace sat down beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. That painting took Maria 45 minutes. She was so proud of it. Tomorrow, she will take it home, and her mother will put it on the refrigerator. And every time Maria sees it, she will remember that someone believed her story was worth telling. You do that, Harrison said softly. You make them believe their stories matter. Everyone's story matters, Mr. Sterling. Rich or poor, powerful or powerless. That is what I tried to tell you at the gala. Harrison turned to look at her. In the soft light of the art room, with paint smudged on her cheek and exhaustion in her eyes, she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. Not because of her appearance, but because of the light that shone from within her. Please call me Harrison, he said quietly. Mr. Sterling is the person I am trying to stop being. Grace smiled. Really smiled? For the first time since he had arrived at the center. Okay, Harrison, but you have a long way to go, I know, he admitted. But I am willing to walk that path if you will show me the way. As they cleaned up together in comfortable silence, Harrison realized something profound had shifted inside him. The things that had once defined his worth, money, power, status, suddenly seemed hollow compared to the simple act of helping a child discover their creative voice. His phone buzzed with messages from his office. Urgent matters requiring immediate attention. Harrison silenced it and continued washing paintbrushes. For the first time in his adult life, something mattered more than business. Grace noticed the gesture and said nothing. But Harrison caught the slight smile on her face. Perhaps he thought he was finally learning what it meant to be truly wealthy. 2 months passed like pages turning in a book Harrison never knew he needed to read. The community center became his sanctuary, a place where his name carried no weight and his bank account meant nothing. He arrived early each Tuesday and Thursday, staying late to ensure every brush was clean, every easel properly stored. The children had stopped calling him the new volunteer and simply called him Harry, accepting him as part of their world. Grace watched this transformation with cautious hope. She had seen wealthy people dabble in charity before, seeking tax deductions or social media praise before disappearing when the novelty faded. But Harrison kept showing up. He remembered birthdays, asked about sick relatives, celebrated small victories with genuine enthusiasm. Still, she kept her emotional distance, protecting her heart from someone whose world remained so different from her own. One rainy Thursday evening, Grace arrived at the center looking exhausted. Harrison noticed immediately how she moved more slowly than usual, how her smile seemed forced. After the children left, he found her sitting in the small office, her head in her hands. Grace. He knocked gently on the door frame. Are you okay? She looked up, and Harrison saw tears tracking down her cheeks. His chest tightened with concern. In all their time together, he had never seen her cry. My father, she said softly, her voice breaking. The treatment is not working. The doctor said he has maybe 6 months, possibly less. And I cannot afford the experimental program that might help him. Insurance will not cover it. And I have already used every dollar I had saved. Harrison sat down across from her, fighting the instinct to immediately write a check and solve the problem. Grace had taught him that real compassion meant more than throwing money at difficulties. I am so sorry. Your father is lucky to have you. Lucky? Grace laughed bitterly. I am failing him. I work constantly, but it is never enough. And now, this center might close too. The building owner is selling, and the new buyers want to demolish everything to build luxury apartments. We have 60 days to find new space or raise enough money to make a competing offer. She gestured around the small office, at the walls covered with children's artwork, at the worn furniture that had served the community for decades. These kids have nowhere else to go. Art programs get cut from schools first. This place is their only outlet, their only safe space to express themselves. And I am going to lose it all. Harrison felt something crack open inside his chest. Here was a woman who gave everything to others, who worked herself to exhaustion for children who were not her own, who faced impossible choices with grace and courage. Meanwhile, He had spent years accumulating wealth he barely noticed spending. "Let me help," he said quietly. Grace shook her head. "I do not want your charity, Harrison. I told you that from the beginning. This is not charity. This is investment." Harrison leaned forward, his voice intense. "You have taught me more in 2 months than I learned in years of business school. You showed me that real value comes from what you give, not what you take. Let me use my resources for something that actually matters." "I cannot accept that kind of money from you." "Why not?" "Because of your pride? Because you think accepting help makes you weak?" Harrison's words were gentle but firm. "You taught these children that asking for help is brave, that we are stronger together than alone. Does that lesson not apply to you?" Grace wiped her eyes, looking at him with an expression that held both frustration and something softer. "Because if I let you fix this with your money, what happens when you get bored and move on? These children will suffer. My father will suffer. I will suffer. And do not think of it as my money. Think of it as the universe balancing scales that have been unfair for too long." Harrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "Grace, I am not the same person who insulted you at that gala. You changed me. This place changed me. Let me prove that the change is real." Before Grace could respond, Harrison's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw his mother's name. With a sigh, he answered, "Harrison, where are you?" Victoria Sterling's voice carried her usual tone of command. "The Rothschild dinner started 30 minutes ago. You promised to attend." Harrison looked at Grace, at the tears still drying on her cheeks, at the weight of the world she carried on her shoulders. "Something more important came up, Mother. Please give them my apologies. More important than a $50 million partnership. Have you lost your mind?" Victoria's voice rose. "Ever since that incident at the gala, you have been acting strange. Missing meetings, ignoring opportunities. People are starting to talk. Let them talk." Harrison kept his eyes on Grace as he spoke. "I am learning what actually matters, and it has nothing to do with business deals or social climbing." He ended the call before his mother could respond. Grace stared at him, surprise clear on her face. "That dinner was important to you," she said. "You are more important." The words came out before Harrison could stop them, honest and raw. "This place is more important. Those children are more important. When did we decide that money matters more than people?" Grace stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street. "You cannot save everyone, Harrison. You cannot fix every problem with good intentions and a checkbook. Maybe not. But I can start here with you, with this center, with children who deserve better than what life has given them so far." Harrison joined her at the window. "My company has a foundation. It sits there collecting tax benefits while doing minimal good. Let me redirect it, make it actually serve people who need help. Let me fund the experimental treatment for your father by this building. Expand the programs you have dreamed about but never had resources to create. Why?" Grace turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much?" Harrison reached up and gently wiped a remaining tear from her cheek, his hand lingering perhaps a moment too long. "Because 2 months ago, I was a man who measured worth in dollars and power. Then you stood in front of hundreds of people and told me that kindness costs nothing. You were right, but you were also wrong about one thing." "What?" "Kindness does have a cost. It costs pride, ego, the comfortable numbness that comes from never truly seeing other people's pain. You made me pay that cost, and I am grateful for it. You showed me that the life I was living was empty, that all my success meant nothing because I had forgotten how to be human." Grace's breath caught. They stood inches apart, the rain drumming against the window, the art room quiet around them. "Harrison, I cannot let you do this just because you feel guilty about what happened. This has nothing to do with guilt anymore." Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper. "Grace, somewhere between hauling paint supplies and learning that Miguel wants to design buildings that help people. And I fell in love with the woman who showed me how to become him." The confession hung in the air between them. Grace's eyes widened, and Harrison saw fear and hope warring in her expression. "You do not love me," she said softly. "You love the idea of redemption, of being a better person. When the novelty wears off, You will go back to your real life. My real life is here. Harrison took her hands in his. My real life is teaching Sophie to mix colors, listening to David talk about his week, making sure Maria has enough paper to capture every story in her imagination. My real life is watching you transform pain into beauty, struggle into strength. That is real. Everything else is just theater. A tear slipped down Grace's cheek, but this time it looked different. I am scared. Scared to trust this. Scared to trust you. What if you are wrong? What if this feeling fades? Then, I will fight to keep it alive every single day. Harrison squeezed her hands gently. I am not asking you to trust me completely right now. I am asking you to let me prove myself. Let me help save this center. Let me help save your father. Let me show you that some people really do change when they meet someone worth changing for. Grace studied his face for a long moment. Seeing past the expensive haircut and designer clothes he had stopped wearing to the center, she saw sincerity, determination, and something she had been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. She saw a man who had been lost and was finding his way home. Okay, she whispered, but on conditions. This center remains community-owned. My father is consulted about his treatment, not just told what will happen. And you continue showing up, not as Harrison Sterling the billionaire, but as Harry the volunteer who cares about these kids. Deal. Harrison smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Though I need to add one more thing to our agreement. What? Let me take you to dinner. Not at some expensive restaurant where neither of us can be ourselves. Somewhere simple, where we can talk about art and dreams and what we want to build together. Grace laughed, the sound breaking through the tension like sunlight through clouds. You are asking me on a date? I am asking the woman who changed my life if she will give me a chance to make her happy. Harrison paused. Is that too forward? Completely. Grace's smile was genuine now, reaching her eyes. But after everything else, I suppose we are past subtle. 3 weeks later, the Riverside Community Center held a celebration. Harrison's foundation had purchased the building and committed to a 10-year expansion plan. New art supplies filled the storage rooms. 3 additional instructors had been hired. Grace's father had begun the experimental treatment, and early results showed promise. But the biggest change was not visible in the building or the programs. It showed in Harrison himself. He stood with Grace before a room full of children, parents and community members, holding a paintbrush instead of a microphone. Together, they unveiled a mural the children had created. An explosion of color and hope depicting what the center meant to them. Miguel had painted buildings reaching toward the sky. Sophie had added her grandmother's garden. David had included a figure that looked suspiciously like Harrison teaching a child to paint. At the center of it all, Grace had helped the children paint the words that had started everything. Kindness costs nothing. Harrison's mother attended, standing stiffly near the back. She had fought his decisions, threatened to cut him off from the family fortune, warned him he was ruining his reputation. Harrison had listened patiently, then told her something he should have said years ago. I love you, Mother, but I am done living for your approval. I am done measuring my worth by bank statements and business deals. I found something real here, and I am not giving it up. Victoria had been furious, but as she watched her son now, laughing with children who adored him, standing beside a woman who looked at him with genuine affection, something shifted in her expression. Perhaps she remembered the boy Harrison had been before ambition hardened him. Perhaps she recognized that her son was truly happy for the first time in years. After the celebration, Harrison and Grace walked through the center, turning off lights and straightening chairs. They moved in comfortable synchronization to people who had learned each other's rhythms. Do you ever miss it? Grace asked quietly. The power, the status, the life you had before. Harrison considered the question carefully. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Everything was clear. Success was measured in dollars, power in titles, worth in what you owned. But that clarity came at a cost. I had stopped seeing people as human beings. I had become something hollow, wearing an expensive suit. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You gave me back my humanity, Grace. You showed me that real wealth is measured in smiles, in changed lives, and children discovering they have voices worth hearing. I would give up every dollar I have before I would go back to who I was. Grace reached up and touched his face gently. You gave me something too. You showed me that people can change, that second chances matter, that hope is not foolish. I love you, Harrison said simply. I love your strength, your compassion, your stubborn refusal to accept less than what people deserve. I love that you saw something worth saving in a man who had forgotten how to be kind. I love you, Grace Mitchell, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I am worth the chance you took on me. Tears filled Grace's eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too, Harry, not Harrison Sterling, the billionaire. But Harry, the man who shows up, who cares? Who changed his entire world because he finally opened his eyes and saw what really mattered. They kissed in the empty art room, surrounded by children's paintings and the smell of fresh paint. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. But inside the Riverside Community Center, two people had found something that could not be bought or sold. They had found love built on mutual respect, shared values, and the simple truth that every person matters. Harrison thought back to that night at the gala, to the moment Grace had walked away from him with dignity and strength. He had been ruined that night, just as the story would say, but not in the way people expected. He had been ruined for the shallow life he had been living. He had been ruined for empty success and hollow victories. Grace had ruined him for anything less than a life lived with purpose, compassion, and love. And as he held her close, Harrison realized that being ruined had been the best thing that ever happened to him, because in the ruins of his old life, he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found himself, and he had found home. The lights of the center glowed warm against the night as Harrison and Grace locked the door, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Together, they would continue teaching children that their stories mattered. Together, they would prove that transformation was possible. Together, they would build a life based not on what they owned, but on what they gave. Harrison had learned the truth that night at the gala, though it took him months to fully understand it. The best things in life really do cost nothing. Kindness, compassion, love, purpose. These things cannot be purchased. They can only be chosen, cultivated, and shared. And in choosing them, Harrison Sterling had finally become wealthy in the ways that truly mattered. The end.